Criteria for efficient demand forecasting. A forecast is said to be successful when the expected demand is equal to the actual demand. This can only be possible if the right method of demand forecasting is selected. Some of the criteria for good demand forecasting is follows. It should be accurate, timeliness, affordability, ease of interpretation, flexibility, ease in using available data, ease of use, or it should be reliable and durable at the same time. When we are talking about accuracy, almost all the methods of demand forecasting should yield an accurate result under different circumstances. However, not all methods are appropriate to be used for all kinds of forecasting. For example, a lack of statistical data limits the use of regression analysis in order to predict demand. Therefore, an appropriate selection of forecasting technique would ensure accuracy of result. This implies that organization should make forecast close to real figure so that the real picture of demand can be determined. For example, there would be an increase in the sales in the coming year is an inaccurate forecast. On the other hand, there would be increased in the sales by 30% in the next year would be an accurate forecast because we are getting to know by how much the sales would increase. Timeliness is the demand forecasting method used for both the time period varies. For example, the demand for a new product which needs to be introduced for the first time in the market cannot be easily accessed using a time series method. This is because this method requires the data collected over the long period of time. Hence, it is very important that demand forecasting method which is used both the times period would vary and hence we should be taking care of. When we talk about affordability, organizations should select a method that suits their budget and requirement without compromising on the outcome. For example, the complete enumeration method of demand forecasting would yield an accurate result but could prove expensive for the small scale organization. When we are talking about flexibility, yes, flexibility should be one of the criteria for a good demand forecasting method. Flexibility in using demand forecasting technique would be a necessary condition for making an effective forecasting. The next one could be ease in using the data. Depending on the objective of forecasting, the forecaster should use simple yet effective method for forecasting. And the data what they are using should be simplified for understanding purpose and for implementation as well. The next one is ease of implementation. As we have already seen as one of the very end step of demand forecasting, wherein we have seen that interpretation or implementation of the data are very important. Hence, in the forecasting method that is carried out, it is very important that the interpretation or implementation should be eased. That means it should be implemented successfully. The next one is reliability. If certain method has yielded reliable outcome in the past, the same method would be used for forecasting in the future also. Hence, reliability plays a very important role and it should be very reliable. So, whatever method you are using for your organization, it should be reliable because the end result should be good so that it can help your organization for future growth and outcome. The next one is durability of outcome. Forecast made using demand forecasting technique should be valid in the long run. For example, in the case of new product, there is a certain time lag between the period when the forecast is made and for the period when it is entering into a market. Hence, durability should also be maintained. So with this, we have seen that these are the various criteria for good demand forecasting. Let's see what are the limitations of demand forecasting. The first one is lack of statistical data or historical data. So the first one is lack of historical sales data. Let's say if a new company is entering into a market with a new product, so they do not have any past data. So in that case, it becomes very difficult to forecast at times or their future growth or sales. So in that case, they might assist or they might take help of some research agency, consultancy firms, etc. in order to determine how the things would go around. Hence, it is very important, and it is also one of the limitations that lack of historical sales data can be put into. The next one is unrealistic assumption. Demand forecasting is based on various assumptions which may not always be consistent with the present market condition. In such case, relying on the assumption may give an incorrect result at times. The next one is cost incurred. Demand forecasting incurs different cost for different organization for implementation because many things are involved in this whole process. These costs may be very high depending on the complexity of the forecasting method selected and the resources utilized. Owing to the limited means, it becomes very difficult for the new startup and the small scale organization to perform demand forecasting. The next limitation is the change in the fashion. Consumer taste and preference continue to change, and these are very dynamic in nature because taste and preferences are very subjective. It depends on individual to individual and very dynamic in the sense they keep on changing very often. This limits the use of demand forecasting as it is generally based on historical trend analysis. The next one is lack of expertise. Demand forecasting requires effective skills, knowledge, expertise of personnel making the forecasting happen to be a successful one. There are not much of people or employee in an organization who have these skill sets. In the absence of trained experts, the demand forecasting becomes much more challenging for any organization. And this is because if the responsibility of demand forecasting is aligned to untrained personnel, it could bring lot of loss to the organization. So hence, this is again one of the limitations of demand forecasting. The next limitation is with regard to sociological factor. Consumer usually prefer a particular type of product over a period. However, factors such as fear of war, changes or some economic policy getting changed would bring lot of changes and can affect a consumer psychology. In such cases, the outcome of forecasting may not longer hold very relevant. Hence, these are the few limitations that we have discussed about demand forecasting. Thank you.